There once was a man named Gold Roger who was king of the pirates. He had fame, power, and wealth beyond your wildest dreams. Before they hung him from the gallows, these were the final words he said.
Our perspective is yours for the taking, but you'll have to join us first. We left everything we debated at the Yonko table.
Ever since, pirates from all over the world set sail for the Grand Line, searching for the Yonko table, the table that will make their dreams come true. Yo, everyone. That is the voice of your Yonko host, Dr. J. Saturni, and we are setting sail into the realm of video games with Final Fantasy XVI. That's right, folks. Better late to the show than never showing up. We are here approximately 2 months and some change later for Final Fantasy XVI. That's given us enough time to digest the game, really sit on it, reflect on it, and get a good idea of how we feel about this game, how we feel about the series, and what we think the game franchise should proceed with going forward. But I am not alone in this endeavor. I have Supernovas and Admirals here to help me deep dive FF16 here today. And let's get into it. All right, so let me throw this out there, kind of just get a feel for the room a little bit, because Toasty, I haven't seen you in a good minute on this. It's been a while. Hooper TV, I've only seen you on the Bear. Let me ask you. Oh, go ahead.
No, it's been a minute. Yeah,
it's been a minute.
Just a couple minutes.
Yeah, of course. Give or take. Let me ask you guys this. What? Are you guys like fresh Final Fantasy fans? Or have you been fans for years and years? What was your exposure to Final Fantasy before like getting into this game in particular?
Yeah, I think one of I feel like one of our main kind of franchises on this pod that we like to talk about is Kingdom Hearts.
Oh,
and I think what's funny, I think for people of a certain generation, like who kind of like Kingdom Hearts were kind of their first like meaty kind of JRPG and kind of like that kind of realm. Final Fantasy was set from that perspective is kind of this like almost like big brother to Kingdom Hearts, almost this kind of like legendary figure. Like you get like breadcrumbs in Kingdom Hearts of like these different characters of like Cloud and Sephiroth and Leon,
right.
His name's Squall. And honestly, I really do think that's been like one of the biggest impacts for like my kind of like relationship with the franchise, where it was like, oh, I'm having fun in Kingdom Hearts, like jumping through these Disney worlds. What is this other fantasy game that's like supposedly kind of like, taking like influencing Kingdom Hearts in that way? And so I had this kind of like lofty kind of like perspective of it. I think the first one I really got my hands on and really dived into was some of the GBA games. I think I did like
oh damn.
I think I did Tactics Advance. And I think I did
Tactics
like
Advance.
I did like Final Fantasy 1 and 2. It's been a weird journey for me.
Wow, okay.
They did like a 1 and 2 remake. And so just from there, I just think like getting bits and pieces of like hearing about 7, diving into 12, like playing 13 when that originally dropped. Like it's been a weird up and down history for me, but it's been there for so long. Some of my earliest gaming moments are like with this franchise, and it's definitely one of my favorites. If it's not, Zelda might be one, like Final Fantasy might be one.
This is right there. So, wow.
Yeah, it's really right there for me.
No, I'm practically in the same boat too. My first exposure to this was Kingdom Hearts. I've always heard of Final Fantasy like through the grapevine up like, because I had a PS1, I had a PS2 growing up. But those games in particular always kind of pushed me away. Just because just of the style of gameplay it was turn-based. You had to take turns like attacking one another, and as a kid growing up, I needed the action, I needed the movement. So a turn-based game would just annoy the hell out of me, where I'm like, damn, I want to move and dodge that attack. I can't do that in this game. Kingdom Hearts satisfied that for me, but it introduced me to some of these characters like you mentioned, like Leon, Cloud, and I like the design of these characters. I'm like, whoa, look at Cloud. Why has he got that scarf around his mouth? Why has he got a claw and a big sword? It's like early 2000s cringe, but I was in it. I wanted to know
Cloud
more.
Was so cool in Kingdom Hearts.
It was so cool.
He was just so cool.
And then like from there, I mean, goodness, I think my first my first proper Final Fantasy game was Crisis Core on the PSP. So I didn't even play 7 before playing that game, but I loved Crisis Core. And then my first numbered entry that I played, for better or worse, was 13, Final Fantasy 13. And that's a whole can of worms that I don't want to get into.
A whole other podcast.
A whole other podcast. It really is. But I mean, I've always had this love for this series. You know, despite what games I might think are better than the other, I've always been like, man, this franchise really like affected my taste in games in general, whether it be RPGs or action RPGs, or just even what I want to see in protagonists in games in general. So yeah, no, I've loved Final Fantasy even growing up as a kid to a degree. Toasty, what about you?
Yeah, of course. I'm the one that introduced you to the series.
Of course, that's exactly what happened. Right.
Yeah, didn't have the time to play them, but I still introduced you to them.
Of course.
No, but in serious note, I became a fan around 15. I did know about the series a long time ago, but
Final Fantasy 15 or
15.
Oh, okay.
15.
Okay.
But of course, I had the false belief that you have to play every game to get the context eventually.
Man, that's still one of the biggest gripes with the series. Some people don't know. I didn't know even going in either. I thought they were somewhat connected.
Yes, people know it's an anthology, so every game is completely different. Different characters, different story, different universe at times. So that's something that made me not play them for a while. I did play 7, which I love 15, and now 16. Kingdom Hearts was never a really big fan of it growing up. It's not until the later time I got the collection so far edition, I think.
Oh, the story so far? Yeah.
And even then, it was a struggle to get to a lot of the games just because of how backward the mechanics were.
Some mechanics are dated. They haven't aged completely well.
I know, or some games are just trash. We can just say that. But, I mean, overall, I'm kind of bringing the series. I'm starting to go back and play the previous one. I'm currently playing 13. And I like it so far. Yeah, I like it. It's a really good series. Interesting.
All right, fair enough. So I see we're kind of all over the spectrum with when we were exposed to Final Fantasy to a degree, so that's interesting. Let me ask you guys this now, you know, because we're here for Final Fantasy 16. How are you guys kind of following this game? Like, were you like from day one, as soon as they dropped the first teaser image, were you following every demo, every trailer? Like, at least for me, I was kind of like a spectator off in the background. Like, I was interested when this game was gonna come out, but I wasn't paying attention too much to like the big gameplay reveals, the big trailers. I did know some of the people working on it. Like, one of them was like for the combat, it was like the guy who worked on Devil May Cry 5. So I was like, oh wow, Devil May Cry 5 is really good. So for combat, that would be interesting. But how were you guys following this game? Or did you just pick it up once it dropped and be like, okay, yeah, I have no idea what I'm getting into. I'll play it now.
I've probably been following this game like since that first trailer in, I think it was like a PlayStation showcase, so kind of like besides what was coming for the PS5 back in like, I guess this would have been 2020, I think.
Yeah, it was some time ago.
I've been following it pretty hard since then, and you know, I just think there's like a handful of like seminal franchises in gaming where it feels like the gaming world stops, where it's like, yo, a new numbered Final Fantasy is coming out. And I remember watching that trailer, and you know, Square Enix, like, for better or worse, they love dipping their hands in like a lot of different things. And so when like the trailer started, I remember thinking to myself, like, oh, this seems interesting. I think I picked up, it was kind of like Final Fantasy. I think they may have dropped it was like Square Enix. And I remember kind of being like, oh, is this gonna be like, you know, another like off the beaten path Square Enix game? This is gonna be kind of like a Final Fantasy adjacent. They did Final Fantasy Origins, I think, recently.
Oh yeah. Stranger of
like,
Paradise, yeah.
Yeah. Could it be like in that kind of vein?
They've been
And
doing a
then when
lot of those.
they do a lot. And when the trailer revealed it was a numbered entry, I was like, oh man, here we go. And I've been, I'm not going to be somebody who's like reading the tea leaves of like all these different, publisher interviews and stuff like that. But like pretty much anytime there's a new trailer, I think I like
You're
to
there.
download. Yeah, I was like going in and out the website to figure out like the world and kind of like, as you're saying, hearing about like this Yoshi P character.
Yoshi P.
Yeah, these different kind of names who, for somebody who's never played 14, were kind of like new to me. Followed this one pretty hard. So I think, like, as I said, like Zelda and Final Fantasy, when it's like kind of like the main kind of developers behind it, I'm locked in. I'm following all the way up until a release date to make sure I'm there day one.
You know what? I had a similar experience. I remember when the trailer came out, I watched every trailer. That was right after we were done with 7.
Oh, okay. Oh, the 7 remake? 7 remake?
7 remake,
okay.
Of course. I was watching every trailer, watching every video, but it did not hook me in until the demo that was released a couple weeks before the game got released. And I actually got my hand into the combat, because it is, we can all agree as people who play a game, it is totally different watching somebody play a game and playing it yourself. Watching somebody play a game, the mechanics might seem dumb, but once I actually got my hand into the game, I remember I called Dr. Jason and was like, I'm pre-ordering this game right now. And I'm not just going to pre-order the base edition, I'm going deluxe edition, because this game is going to be amazing. So yeah, we've been following it forever, but I do have to say, I was hesitant about getting the game at first just because of what happened with 15. Lucky for me, I got 15 when the Royal Edition came out, so I got the complete package. But I didn't know at the beginning of the scene, the game was incomplete. There were a lot of portion missing, a lot of little mechanics in the game missing that I didn't have to experience. So I was worried about that. And I was hoping to pick it up a little bit down the road. But the demo, that's the decision they could have made. Pen down.
The demo is definitely what got me to actually go in day one. I was following the game to a degree. Like watching some gameplay here and there if I ever came across the video, but I wasn't following it too much, and I think part of that was just because, like you said, we're in a post Final Fantasy 15 world. It like I've become kind of hesitant to buying certain games day one. Not to say Final Fantasy 15 was not a good game. I feel like it was good even on day one to an extent, but like you said, it was missing certain features, missing certain story bits. Some people didn't like the combat.
Lest we forget that you should have watched like a full movie.
Oh my god, Kingsglaive. Oh my god, no, and it was something where like I knew to do that even before playing it, but it's like, what are they what are they thinking?
Wait, did you say we have to read a chapter manga?
There was a movie, and then there was also an anime. There was like a 4-episode anime, Brotherhood, that you had to watch. And it was like, Square Enix, like Hooper TV has been saying, like they really go big on Final Fantasy. That's their Zelda. That's their Zelda to Nintendo. And, for 15, it was the next big numbered entry. They didn't have a follow-up to Final Fantasy 13 outside of the MMO, which was 14, for years. And then they're like, okay, this is the next numbered entry. It was originally Versus 13, but now we're going to rename it to Final Fantasy 15. And this is the next big thing. So they wanted to make it big. They did mobile games. They did movie, anime, everything. And I feel like
that mobile game.
God.
Right.
I
forgot about that one.
The mobile game. And I feel like it, to a degree, Square Enix got lost in the sauce in doing all that. I feel like they forgot what it meant for making a complete package from day one within the game, and not this multimedia like extravaganza like the way 15 was made out to be.
It would have been so much better if they included the movie and the 4-part episode in the game itself, where right before starting the game they said, oh, there's this new content that you should watch before starting the game, because I feel a lot of people never knew about those 2 different content. And I do remember when I was going to play 15, You were the one that told me to go watch those movies. I would have never gone out of my way to go watch them.
I don't even know how I figured it out. I just knew it. I'm like, damn, I better watch this before I play the game.
There's like a online, like a like I guess a watch list or like kind of like an order you should
a guide.
Yeah, be doing that,
which is crazy. That is crazy. Like I get what Square Enix was trying to do. Like, you know, they wanted this to kind of be like a successor to Final Fantasy VII, where 7 had like multiple movies and spin-offs and sequels. So with 15, they were like, okay, yeah, we got to go big. But like what Tosi was saying with 15, I like the package of the Royal Edition, which came with everything. But it made me hesitant going into a game like 16. But, you know, I was still excited. At some point, I would have gotten the game. I was like, yeah, you know, I like what I see, but I'll get it when it's on sale or something. The day that demo dropped, and I played that 2-hour demo, I pre-ordered the deluxe edition of that game afterwards. I was hooked. That demo, I mean, yeah, for me, that's what I needed to see and play to get the idea of, wow, the rest of the game is like this, and I hope it gets better, obviously, but that just got me hooked. The production values that Square Enix put into this game in general, but in particular for that demo, I'm like, this is insane. There's no way the rest of the game is like this, with the boss fights, the music, the story. So I mean, that was my exposure to 16. From there, I'm like, all right, day one, I'm going over to my local friendly neighborhood Best Buy. I'm picking up my copy, coming back and booting that sucker up. But yeah, no, let's get into it. 16, Final Fantasy 16. So, oh God, it's like, where do you even start? Funny enough, I think one of the interesting elements with this game, and I feel like it's been a controversy with Square Enix from the beginning, was the combat. And I feel like it's been a steady progression ever since Final Fantasy X, after Final Fantasy X, where you started to notice Square Enix slowly drifting away from what put them on the map, which is the turn-based, combat system. From 10 onwards, they start going more and more into like real-time combat. I think they dipped their feet into Kingdom Hearts, and they're like,
it's not like a straight line, but it's not like they started experimenting. They kind of like experimented with their combat a little more.
Yes, like let's make it more cinematic. Let's give the player more agency in combat, where they have to move, they have to dodge, and then we ultimately end up here with 16. What did you guys think about the combat? Because I feel like that's like one of the biggest sticking points for a game like this, because sometimes I see the discourse online. Some people will go as far as to say, I think they're wrong, but they go as far as to say, this is not Final Fantasy. This is not a Final Fantasy game. Absolutely not. This combat, what is this? Devil May Fantasy? Not my Final Fantasy. And I'm like, are you sure you're a fan of Final Fantasy?
I am here to get into like how much Final Fantasy this game is. I'm down to like unpack that a little more in this conversation. But it's definitely not the combat that, like, for me makes it,
that makes you question it. Okay.
Maybe question the Final Fantasy-ness. Like, I think, as you're saying, Square Enix has always been experimenting, even when they were doing like, their turn-based. They eventually did it like active time. And I think that was, like,
battle.
A big jump for them. And then when they went to 10, it was still turn-based, but it was like this kind of very unique kind of like I don't know, like a batting order system, and that one has a unique name too, but I'm forgetting it now. They've always been experimenting, so I'm like, I almost feel like experimenting with the battle system is actually fundamentally Final Fantasy. You know what I mean?
It always has been. Day one.
It's always has been. 15 plays different from 7 Remake, and this plays different from that. You know what I mean? So I am here for Square Enix continue to experiment, continue to evolve, continue to iterate on like different editions. And this battle system was very interesting to me. I enjoyed it a lot. It felt really good. You know, I don't know if we're ready for like kind of like nitpicking. You know, I guess like the one thing I would say that like once I got into a rhythm of like kind of like my setup, it almost got like almost too easy, you know, where I was just like, all right, I know what I'm doing, and this works for every battle, and I'm just gonna keep using it until it fails me. And by end game, it just didn't fail. I don't know if I just found the perfect setup, but
I felt
it still felt good.
Yeah.
I have to say, honestly, the people that are complaining about the combat, even as a new player or fan of the Final Fantasy series, we can say, I started first seeing in 2017, 2018, so 5 years. For me, Final Fantasy is about the story, not the combat. I can tell you right now, I absolutely hated. Yeah, I absolutely hated the combat in 15, but I liked the story.
Damn, you hated the combat in 15.
Yes, until you unlock the royal weapon, I felt like the character was too heavy. Same thing with 7. Cloud to me was too heavy. I understand the logic with him having a big sword and he's supposed to do a lot of damage, but it was too heavy. Yes, you could use the other characters, but the other character were either too fast and took too much damage. There was not a real balance. I didn't feel like that in 16. Once you unlock the Shiva power, the fact that you could slide away, freeze enemy, the fact that you could do like the perfect dodge and the parry attack with 16, for me, it felt like the combat was really fluid. At no point did I feel that the character was not efficient at fighting, which is the major difference. And it does show in a game like Stranger of Paradise. I did play the demo for Stranger of Paradise, but the story did not hook me in, which is why I still haven't played it till now. So that's what makes a good Final Fantasy game. Not the combat, the story. And yes, turn-based combat can be really good. I mean, we have all played turn-based combat.
Yeah.
But combat there like this is also perfectly fine.
Okay.
At the end of the day, nobody's going to play a Final Fantasy and say the biggest issue or the biggest thing about the game is the combat. You're going to say, I love the story.
Right. Let me actually put a pin then on the combat, because you do raise an interesting point when it comes to what some people may consider like a better Final Fantasy game than others, and that's the story. And I think that's a good, interesting starting point when it comes to this particular game. Because I think Square Enix, they do a really good job. Because like you said, it's an anthology series, so you don't need any prior knowledge from any other previous entry to understand another. And because of that, each Final Fantasy is set in its own world, separate from all the previous ones. So I'm always looking forward to what Square Enix is going to create for this new world for their next Final Fantasy. In this particular case, what would you, is this dark fantasy? Is this, like, oh God, I know we sometimes get into it in the chat about like what's high fantasy, what's dark fantasy. In this particular case, when it comes to like knights, kingdoms, you know, all that stuff, is this dark fantasy, or?
I would consider this like a dark high fantasy, you know?
Okay.
You know, I think they really lean into taking their world very serious. You know, almost like more than kind of like Final Fantasy X, which feels like has like almost like a whimsical tropical element. Like there being a raging beast kind of destroying cities. And you know, some of the earlier ones also kind of like have that kind of like also kind of high fantasy, but it's kind of like, you know, the crystals, everything's like brightly colored. This is a very dark, a very bleak world. You know, they're trying to lean into like their M rating. They're trying to
the first M rated Final Fantasy. Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, they're trying to push the boundaries. They cuss.
They cuss. They do a lot of cussing and a lot of another act in the game.
And you know, I think. I don't know if the developers kind of spoke to this, but you know, I think there's a clear kind of like Game of Thrones kind of influence. That you can kind of like see.
Yes, they have a lot of
different aspects.
So funny enough, I think because after playing the game, I wanted to learn more about it. You mentioned Game of Thrones. Apparently, a lot of the dev team, when they had to write out and create this world, I think they were ordered. I think they were told or suggested to recommended. I think they recommended to watch Game of Thrones, and I think they watched seasons 1 through 4, which is like peak Game of Thrones. And I see that in this world, like with the political like conversations with different kingdoms and espionage and hierarchies and like it was great.
The mother character in particular is like felt like the most Game of Thrones.
Oh my god, Annabella.
Well, she has like the Catelyn Stark energy in that she hates her son. Like,
yes,
like Catelyn Stark hates Jon Snow, and then she's like also has the Cersei.
Energy. Oh god, that's
the way
right.
She's like taught like babying her like prince, the other prince. You know what I mean? Like later on in the game, and so like that one more than anything, I was like, man, this feels really Game of Thrones. Obviously, like there's like the wolf companion and stuff like that, and like I think there's some like other elements there, but that one in particular really stuck out to me where I was like, man, this feels so Game of Thrones right now.
No, yeah, they've created a really good medieval fantasy, dark fantasy, like you guys were saying, and that's what's so good about it, is the intrigue in this game. As I was playing the game, I always wondered what is next, why are these characters doing this, why is this happening? And I think the setting for me was the best they could have. I like not being in a world like too much technology. I like the fact that it was almost like medieval, like Middle Ages kind of feel to it.
Yeah.
The way the characters were acting, which for me, like it made it so much more interesting, and it added so much more importance to the dominant. Because obviously, if it was set in the modern time, you see a dominant appear in front of you, you throw a nuke at it, and you move on. But with this, it shows you that how powerful and why the dominant were so important, and it helped you understand why certain characters were acting a certain way.
Right. No, I was definitely invested in a world like this, coming from like Final Fantasy 15, which is more like modern day.
To drive a car around.
To drive a car around. There's highways, there's roads.
Yeah. Stations, robots.
Stations. Gas stations are huge.
Gas stations, right. You have 7, which is more, I guess, like futuristic, steampunk-ish a little bit.
Alternate future,
Alternate future. So seeing something like this, because I can't recall when was even the last time they've touched like knights and kingdoms in a Final Fantasy game. I want to say starting with 10 onwards, they haven't really touched that.
I think 12 kind of dabbled.
Was it 12?
A little bit.
Okay.
12 kind of, but it's like it has 12, and I can't remember the kind of like I think lead art director. He has like a very like. I think it's Ivalice, like is kind of like a recurring kind of like consonant, like this specific game designer consistently returns to. I think like Final Fantasy Tactics.
Yeah, I know
what
you're talking about.
Place in like this world.
Yeah,
it kind of has a very distinct vibe that you're like, oh, this is like set in that kind of like world. So it almost like feels separate than your kind of like typical classic kind of like medieval fantasies. Yeah, you really might have to go back to 9. The last time something felt.
That's what I was thinking of, because I remember there was like a knight character in 9, and I'm like, okay, yeah, that was the last time there was like a knights and kingdoms and everything. Okay, yeah, I mean it's been a good minute. It's been a good minute since like a dark fantasy type of game to come around like this, but. Obviously populating this world are different entities. We have, things like the icons, which are basically the summons from Final Fantasy. We have the dominants, like Toasty was saying, which are the characters that are the walking nukes, the powerhouses in this world, where they can harness the power of the icons, like Shiva, Ifrit, Phoenix. But then at the same time, we have the characters. And what is a Final Fantasy game without its characters? I feel like that's crucial. You have to have characters that we give a crap about in a Final Fantasy game. And who's our main character here? Clive Rossfield, heir to the Rossfield throne, or was heir to the throne until...
Actually, he wasn't heir. Joshua was the heir.
Joshua was the heir.
Let's get into this. Like, how do we feel about the characters? Because, like, we might have some difference of opinion here.
Right.
How do we feel about these characters? How do we feel about like them compared to like kind of like other?
You have to compare them. You have to compare them. I think you have
to. You know what I mean?
It's
you guys go first.
It's tough for me. Oh, go ahead, Toasty.
I'll just say. It's a big criticism for me in terms of character design. so far out of all the Final Fantasy game I've played, I always hated the main character attitude. The main character always has a stoic, I'm supposed to be emotionless character. And out of nowhere, in portion of the story, they break down and start crying and bawling. I'm like, you're breaking character, my man. A couple seconds ago, your face was straight as your mom told you, I never wanted you. Not a tear in your eye. Your father died, not a tear in your eye. But for some reason, you're bawling now. And I always hated that. I felt the same thing with Noctis. He was emotionless the entire time during the story because his friends made the game interesting, and they were the one joking when you were fighting and you heard the dialogue.
Right.
13, same thing. The main character is emotionless, but to be fair, she's
Man,
surrounded by clowns.
That's a trend. Now that you point it out, like 13 serious character, 7 serious character, 8 serious character. That's a trope. That's a trope that they do. They have it in all their games.
And for 7, it's justified because, you know, he has the entire, like, becoming a soldier, so that kind of messed up his emotion, but I still did not like it. 13, she's surrounded by clowns. I'll be pissed, too, if I was surrounded by that cast of people. So she's justified. 15, Noctis never smile. Like, it's a trope I really hate, because we all play the game, and we all see it at the time. The character always had that stoic, yes, look at me. I am a soldier. We must fight. At no point did he crack a joke. I absolutely hated that in this game compared to the previous game.
So you're saying you did not like it in this game either with Clive?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, because in this game, unlike 7 and 13 and 15, the side character did not talk that much when you were off in the world doing your stuff. So when you were going from point A to point B or you're fighting monsters, there were no really real dialogue. It was just you running from point A to point B. And that's something that 15, in my opinion, did so much better. The character would joke around. They would say, hey, watch out. They were interactions.
There's a lot of in-game interaction with the characters to make you connect to them.
It made you feel like the characters cared about each other. Obviously, in this game, we got to see that in the cutscene, but they could have done better. And that's something I'm expecting them to change if they ever release, like, you know, DLC the same way that the Royal Edition did, where they add changes later down the game. I expect them to add some line, make the character say something. Hey, watch out. Hey, good job. That's all I needed. I don't know. But I absolutely hate the main character and his attitude. It's aggravating, man. Like, for God's sake.
I get it. I get it.
Smile.
Yeah.
Fucking joke. I understand the world is messed up, but like, do something except being emotionless. It's ridiculous, man.
I know we're talking about characters right now, but like, kind of like the point you're making about like, just kind of like the lack of humor in like Clive, I think like kind of like expands to like the entire game. And so, you know, I really enjoyed like my time with it. But like if like I could like critique it a little bit, it's like, especially if you're pulling from Game of Thrones is really funny. You know what I mean?
Like, they get there.
Yeah, like early Game of Thrones is like plenty of jokes. You know what I mean? Like Tyrion's constantly cracking jokes, like in early Game of Thrones. So
right.
You know, so I was like kind of like wanting like some like comic relief. There are like some characters who kind of like Gav, who kind of like are able to approach kind of maybe like being like a bit of a funny character.
Yeah.
But they never really go for it. And you know, I felt like I was kind of like missing that out of the party. And sort of what you're saying too, Toasty, like the in-game interactions. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing if like Square Enix wants to go into this route where you like play as like one character and you kind of like slowly shed.
Oh yeah, I don't
like,
mind that.
Yeah, like the party elements. But I think the party elements adds to the overall feel and kind of like connection with the cast. When you feel they're interacting with each other, when you're like switching between them, they're talking to you, you're able to help them out. Like you're yelling at Donald to like send you like a heal because you're like dying. You know what I mean? Like those kind of like in-game interactions are like crucial. And like the most you kind of get is with Torgal in this game.
Sick of Torgal.
Yeah,
Torgal.
You know what I mean? He's like you can order him to like send you a heal and it's never a lot. Man,
it's like 2 HP.
To be fair,
to
be fair, we had that equipment that made him do that automatically, so you didn't even have to interact with Torgal, which I have not the entire game.
I think that's a problem.
You turn that on?
Yes,
No,
I'll turn it
it's
on.
it's
Like,
it-
you're
it's
like,
an item. It's an item that basically automatically syncs Torgal to your combat. So like if you're doing a
Yes.
bunch of moves, it'll automatically have Torgal do the moves that you would have commanded to him. I
Yeah.
equipped that.
Is it one of those? Is it one of those 3 equipments?
It's not one of the 3 that you're thinking of. It's like a 4th one, because the ones
Yes,
that you're
okay.
thinking of are like, the automatic dodge.
Oh, yeah, they do that.
I didn't equip any of those. I wanted to play but for Torgal, I equipped that just because it felt so unintuitive to like command him with the D-pad
Torgal.
while you're like parrying an
Yeah.
enemy and juggling them.
Yeah.
But no, I'm kind of with you guys when it comes to like, I think Square Enix, they're kind of stuck in this stereotype that they always want their main protagonists in these Final Fantasy games to be badasses. They want them to be like straight up badasses that could do all these crazy moves and maneuvers, but then they think that badasses are always serious. They don't know how to smile.
But that's because that's a remnant of like the 90s and early 2000s where you have the silent protagonist. You have the Sonic character, the silent main character. Everybody else has character to it, and the Sonic guy is the one that is, I'm on the mission. Let's go from point A to point B. We're not here to mess around, which...
Right, they haven't grown. Yeah, they haven't grown too much from that. But at least, because it's hard for me to say like how I would compare them to other characters, because I mean, I know, God, to this day, I'm still looking at my sealed copy in the corner. I have not played Final Fantasy X, and I know 10 has supposedly some of the best characters in Final Fantasy history.
Well, or 7.
Or 7. 7 comes
7
up.
and 10.
Yeah.
7 comes up. I have played both 7 and 7 Remake. And I love the cast in 7. But God, with 16, I mean, I want to say I did enjoy the cast. Despite their flaws, I liked how, because, I know we had some of these gripes early on, like, why is Jill acting this way early on in the game? Why can't Clive crack a joke? But I feel like the more you put, the more hours you put into the game, and you do like these side quests that expand on the lore, that expand on these character relationships, and even in the main story, I started to grow attached to these characters. There was something really simple late game, and Uber TV, I don't know if you did this side quest, but I know Toasty did. And it was a letter. It was a letter that Jill writes to you as Clive, and she leaves it in your like little inbox thing. But it only gets there if you finish her like, I guess, main side quest towards the end of the game. That is one of the most heartfelt letters I've ever read in anything. Yep. And I was like, damn, bro, God, that hit for me. That hit. Like I know people like to.
Oh, he froze.
Oh no, we're fine.
We're all here.
Yeah, we're all here. You good?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you froze for a second.
Oh, okay. No, I know everyone likes to hype up like, Tifa and Aerith from Final Fantasy VII, and those are great characters. Those are great characters. They're really great. Yeah. But just some of these scenes with Jill, who obviously is one of the party members, one of the protagonists in the story. I really like Jill. I really like Jill as a character. Could they have done a little bit more with her? For sure. Yeah, I feel like there's certain areas.
Kind of gets her main highlight early on, and then, I mean, it's kind of like by design that she kind of like slowly kind of like creeps back and kind of just becomes like a love interest again.
Right.
But that scene on the beach, I thought that was beautiful.
The scene on the beach, I loved it. I loved it.
That was beautiful.
Yeah.
I'll shout out my boy Joshua. I thought
Joshua Crossfield
early on, I guess like spoiler alerts for the entirety of this game. I think early on, because like I think the in-game trailers or like the trailers and kind of like the way it was like set up, you were like led to believe that my boy Joshua's dead. You never see him older in the trailers. He's only a child. So like I didn't kind of expect or think it was a given that we would like meet Joshua later. And so early on in the game, when you start getting like glimpses of like this hooded figure and like you kind of like, yo, is that my boy Joshua? I'm like, I honestly felt so locked into the story, into the game when like we're getting like these like teases of like Joshua. I was like, what is he doing? Like,
where is he? What has he been doing these last several years?
Yeah, you know, and so he was definitely one of my favorite characters. I like Mid. Mid was funny. I think that was
Mid was pretty good. Sid
and Mid. I think
Sid
was, like,
and
really
Mid.
Cool.
Sid,
Yeah.
This is probably the best iteration of Sid in any Final Fantasy. I can't think of any other better version. I can't.
think that's safe to say. I think that's fair.
That's the best one. I mean, because the
I'll
only
give this game the best Sid.
the best Sid, because like the only one where I know of that Sid is prominent, like to this, like even close to this, is I guess maybe 7, because he you know, he's like a party member.
He's a party member in 7.
But yeah, other than that, no, I think this is. I mean, he has so much charm and charisma. I've seen all the TikTok edits with Sid and people like, you know, freaking out over him. Like, yeah, he was that guy. He was that guy.
Wait, pause. Oh, Sid become a party member after the first part of Remake, right? Because I don't think he was in the first part.
Right, in Remake he's not, but in Final Fantasy VII Classic he's a party member later on in the game. Okay. But yeah, this I love Sid. You know, unfortunately you don't stick with him for too long.
Which was another cool kind of element, you know.
It was cool, right?
Doing the time jump was like very interesting.
Yes.
Multiple of them. Multiple. So,
and I feel like, as weird as it may sound, I feel like that's such a big step, at least when it comes to how Japan portrays characters in their games, because typically what you tend to see when it comes to protagonists and like whether it's like an anime, manga, game, movie, whatever, usually it's like the young shonen protagonist to a degree. Like it's usually someone in their teens, sometimes in, you know,
16 to early 20s.
16 to early 20s. You don't really get those people that are like pushing 30, right? Or even into their 30s as like, yes, I am the main character. I like that they did that with Final Fantasy in this regard, because you look at all the other prior protagonists, is the same nonsense. Teenager or young adult in their early 20s. Causing trouble. And it's so funny because like, I think I even saw like a meme or a TikTok edit where it's like, it's like whenever Square Enix eventually makes the next Dissidia Final Fantasy game, you know, the one where all the Final Fantasy protagonists come in and fight each other, they're all kids and young adults, and in comes Clive, this grown-ass man just smacking down on these kids. So that was cool. I like the time skip stuff because you don't get that a lot. At least when it comes to you know, Japanese games that have story at their forefront, except maybe Yakuza, but that's another story. But I like the time jump. I like Torgal. We briefly mentioned Torgal.
Cool.
He's a good boy. This kind of goes into combat. I want to save that for later, but there's an issue with Torgal that I have where I'm like, oh man, I would have, the whole thing with like, I don't know if you noticed this in the menu, he's slowly like gaining attributes like increased speed or increased power. And I'm like, what does this matter? I like, you're not giving me anything to work with that. Like it bothered me. It bothered me.
That's good. That's, you know, we can maybe like put a pin in that too, just like
right.
The
customization, yes, for sure.
Because I like everything we're saying about the story and like the world. You know, it's like, and I appreciate all these like attempts that Square Enix is doing and like all the risk it's taking, aging up these characters, doing these time jumps, like kind of like, you know, I would have preferred a little bit more humor, but kind of like, hey, we're gonna tell like a more serious story. I appreciate all that, but like when I kind of feel myself siding with the kind of people who are questioning the Final Fantasy-ness of it,
What are your red flags? What about this game do you see where you're like, is this Final Fantasy enough? There's crystals.
I feel like they like put it there, but like they don't really create like what I feel like is a Final Fantasy vibe. You know, it's like, and it's gonna be hard for me to explain this. But you have to just stick with me.
All right.
Yes,
I'll
there's a
follow.
Moogle. There's a Moogle.
There's
But,
chocobos.
Like, the Moogle doesn't do anything. You know what I mean? The Moogle is just kind of there. And it's kind of like really doesn't like play a part. Like there's really like no other races kind of like wandering the world except maybe orcs. But like
goblins.
Also,
you barely see them. Yeah, you barely see them.
Yeah,
right.
They're just like there's no like kind of like
there's chocobos, there's wild chocobos.
There are chocobos. I'll give them credit. They have chocobos. The use of like the summons are cool. But like when it like comes to like I don't know, my favorite Final Fantasy worlds, it feels like it really does feel like you're entering like a whole nother place. You know, it feels like you're you know, 10 feels so different from like literally like most fantasies that I've engaged with. Like even 7, even though it has like kind of like these steampunky, like almost Akira-y elements, it also feels like one of a kind. Say what you want about 13.
I got a lot.
Wild. Like, you know what I mean? That world's wild, man. That index they give you of like trying to explain everything.
It's an encyclopedia.
Yeah, it's too much.
Like I spent more time in there trying to figure out what was happening, whether Cocoon was like a moon orbiting Pulse or like whether like Cocoon was inside of Pulse, just high up in the sky. And like even 15, like, you know, 15's weird because it's like, yeah, it has like this modern day, I'm in a car driving around this fantasy world, but that also just like made it feel so like one of one. And as much as I like what they did in 16, it just felt like it was just like missing maybe that like unique element. I guess the icons are there and that's cool, but like, you know, we've seen summons before.
Right.
Maybe like the 1-to-1's different, but it just felt like the overall world was like missing something that like gave it like a more Final Fantasy feel.
Right.
In my opinion.
I can say as far as like because I can kind of see it to that extent when it comes to like enemy variety, and I think that was something I had a problem with because I noticed the further I got into the game, I noticed like, man, I'm like on the opposite side of the map, and I'm still fighting wolves in the desert versus in the jungle, in the forest, and like it's either wolves or goblins, and I'm like, where are the cactuars? Where are
snap! There were no cactuars.
There were no cactuars. Right. There was no
not even as a summon.
Not even as a summon. And there's like I forget the name. I forget the name, but it's that hunched lizard with the cloak that has a little knife, and like it does like 99999 damage to you and all the other. Not in the game either, and it's like I get it. They wanted to create this fantasy world where it's like goblins and orcs and wolves, but I'm like, okay, but where's the Final Fantasy? Yes, you gave me chocobos. You gave me one Moogle.
Where's the cheese? Where's the cheese?
There's a level of cheese that
you're serious.
Yeah.
And the cheesiness too.
Right.
Yeah.
I was missing that. For sure. I mean, like, there's other enemies. Like, I feel like you encounter them a lot with, like some of the contracts that the Moogle gives you. You know, you can fight, oh God, what's the name of those things? Not Ouroboros. The large green tentacle things that, they spit out bad breath. It gives you all these
I know what you're talking
ailments.
About. Those.
Talk about the first boss, right?
The first boss, the first boss in the game. I mean, you see those. That's a Final Fantasy staple. You see the weird cheetah things with the long whiskers that have like the lightning.
That's a good one.
But like at least just roaming the world, just running around and just seeing things and saying, yeah, that's Final Fantasy. You don't get too much. You kind of have to go out of your way to get like contracts to be like, yes, there's a Final Fantasy enemy that I know of. There's Bahamut. No, not Bahamut. What's the name? Behemoth, right?
The dragon.
Yeah.
The four-legged tiger-looking thing with the mohawk. Yeah.
But you see, this is where the game kind of messed up. The game has a diverse environment. So depending where you are, it's more like jungle, or it's more plains, or it's more desert, like we see in the game. they could have easily used different monsters in all this different environment. And
Yeah, I don't know why they didn't do that.
Blight, or
Yeah.
use the excuse that the blight is pushing certain animals that only live in certain section into other section to survive. So the beginning of the game, they could have had more monsters that are usually found in the northern side of the world coming down into Rosaria, and those soldiers have difficulty fighting them because they're not used to fighting these monsters or hunting them. That's where they messed up.
And funny enough, you know, that's something that they were actually aware of, because one of the early bosses you fight is that giant lizard thing that spins like a hedgehog. One of the things that Sid says when you first encounter it is, whoa, I thought those things were only found up north. And he's like, oh no, the blight pushed them down to hunt for food in this area. So I'm like, okay, the devs writing this had that made sense, but they didn't take it a step further by having like different creatures populate different biospheres in the game.
Because the only thing you fight in the desert are the scorpions and those flying bats monster. That's all you can find in the wild.
It's these like generic enemies like from like 30 years ago. Bats, scorpions, spiders. It's
the plant thing.
The plant, the little plant weird creatures. For sure. I feel like they could have done a bit better with the enemy variety. But one thing I think they nailed out of the park, and that's why it's really hard for me to like throw too much shade at them, because you know in one area they're lacking, but in something else they excel at. My God, the grandiose boss battles in this game, Jesus Christ. this oh man, every boss fight from beginning to end, and there's multiple of them, just felt like this big bombastic, epic orchestra styled combat scenario. Like what?
Like a movie. It felt
like a movie. It felt like a movie.
Yeah.
It felt like a movie. And I feel like that was one of the elements that really got me hooked from the demo, was just how crazy these fights are gonna be. And it was like that throughout the entire game. I can say there are fights in here where I went out of my way to download the music for it, because it was so good. I'm gonna say this, and it may be controversial, but I think this is one of the better Final Fantasy soundtracks in terms of like past games. I know we got some iconic ones out there. I know people go hard for 7. They go hard for 6. 6 has some bangers. People love 8 a lot. It's really hard. Like there's 10. Hard. It's hard. It's hard. It's hard to do it.
10 at this point. I still have the disc right here. I need to open it up. I want to start playing it.
Oh, you have a sealed copy too?
Okay, we'll do another 10 pod in 3 months.
We gotta do it.
Yeah, we gotta do a 10 pod because I'll go in on 10.
We got a lot going on in 10.
This is probably, I love compare. I mean, like this is. Some people are like, why do you compare them? Like, comparisons to Thief of Joy. Maybe that's the saying. I don't really know.
Oh, God, you have to, though.
Yeah, but that's Final Fantasy for you. You know what I mean? Like, that's the best part, because all of them are so different, because they're all trying different things, and, like, they're, like, kind of, like, set in a certain place. Like, I feel like it's a part of it. So I'm definitely willing to say this is the best use of summons in the history of Final Fantasy. Yeah,
from my knowledge, easily the best use. The way they're integrated into the story is just phenomenal. And Toasty, I remember telling you about this a little bit too, at least from previous Final Fantasy games. When it comes to summons, it's just a summon. Like it's just you summon a creature and that's it. It's not really tied to the lore or mythos of that world. Sometimes, other times it is.
It's always 10.
There's always. Like I know in some other ones the summons are more serious and more story integrated, but this I 100% agree. This has to be the best integration of summons into the story from any Final Fantasy.
Because it makes sense why the character could use certain summons. They didn't just come out of nowhere. He had a purpose and like he was capturing them. So again, it does make sense. Because I'm thinking about the previous game. You getting the summon in 7 was you doing that VR.
You do a
summon
VR
thing.
mission,
Yeah,
and then you
that
can
VR
summon
thing.
Ifrit. There you
Yeah,
go.
which lore-wise doesn't make sense as to why you could summon Ifrit. It may seem that, in a way, Ifrit didn't even exist in the world, but it was the game way of saying, oh, by the way, use something from the previous game, you want to use this. But the soldiers, when you summon Ifrit, then react and say, holy shit, this is Ifrit. Run. They
Right.
didn't think about that. Yeah.
Right. And I feel like because of the way they integrated the summons into this game, that's how I that's how I got invested into the story. Very few other Final Fantasy games did I ever really care to dig into the mythos of the world that they're in. Like I love me my 7, but I don't really care for, like, you know, how did Midgard form hundreds of years ago? Who was the first CEO? Did the CEO have children? I really don't care. Like, I love the story, but I don't care like that about 7. With this, and Toasty knows this, I dug into everything about this. I dug into the kingdoms. I dug into the lineage. I dug into the wars and the relationships. I've never done that in a Final Fantasy game. I know 13 has its encyclopedia in the menus. I was not reading that. I was not reading that nonsense. And part of it too is I like that they kind of took a page from Amazon Prime with its streaming service with the active time lore. Ingenious.
RPG. For me, for me, like, any game from now on needs to have that feature. I know
any game, every game. Halo needs it. Call of Duty needs it.
Actually, to be fair, with certain games, obviously, if it's like a 10-hour game, obviously you don't need it unless you're playing this 10-hour game over a year. But that's on you. But if the game goes over 50 hours, you need that, because sometime as I was watching a cutscene, I would see a character and say, "Who's that character? I can't remember."
Yeah.
You click a button, I read it, I'm like, oh, okay, shit, that's right. I meant this.
Who's the name of that person? What kingdom is that they just mentioned?
Exactly. All of those little details actually do help. And I do believe that any franchise, I would argue a game like even like Halo should have that also, especially since the game are not always coming out back to back. It takes years between games. If a character is mentioned from Halo 2, who the hell is going to remember that if you play Halo 2 when you were in middle school? For some people, they might say, "Oh yeah, that's this character," but because of graphic and the way the character changed,
you're on Halo 8, and you're like, "Damn, I don't remember the Arbiter. Who's that?"
So exactly, for me, I'm looking forward to the active time lore in every Final Fantasy game, because at no point in this story was I confused in a cutscene. Every little cutscene that I've seen and I had a question about, I clicked on it, and the game was smart enough to say, "Hey, by the way, like the Amazon feature, when you pause, those are the character that appears in the setting. This is an important item." And sometimes it's not even a character, like I said, it's an item. Like at the beginning of the game, when Clive and Jill were sitting in, I guess, the balcony, and they were looking up at the red star, she was praying to the red star. And to anybody who didn't read the active time lore, to say, okay, she's praying to the moon, maybe. But when you click the active time lore, you realize she was praying to the red star because people in their world pray to the red star so that their loved one or people that they cherish can come back home. That changes and adds so much more to the story than before. And it does.
I definitely used it a lot early on to like get settled in the world, and I found it super helpful. But I really want to shout out the character who's on the base who like will like whip out the map and then kind of like details,
Vivian.
I love that. Like
that was beautiful.
Like, whenever it was like, all right, the next mission is to talk to her, and you know she's about to like kind of set up what you have to do next, what just happened. And it like does that, like I think like the camera zooms into her and it goes to the
it zooms into the map, and the map unfolds, and the pieces are moving. And and even when it doesn't do that, when you can just look at the map like in the menu from her desk, like I love seeing that. You see the like a chessboard. You see the pieces moving north, south. It's perfect. And then you have kind of like 13, you have your in-game encyclopedia with Harpocrates the guy who's like your lore master, and he gives you everything concerning the lore that you need to know. If there's like a dominant character, a villain that you want to learn more about, you go to him, you search him up, and then you can figure out what you missed out about that character.
Not only that, at the bottom of that character, it tells you the most important connection that character had. So if you go on Clive, at the bottom, it automatically tells you, oh, if you look up Clive, you might want to know about Joshua, Jill, the Rossfield family. I thought that was a pretty interesting feature also.
Yes.
Because it's practically told you who was connected to which character.
Like it'll do something where if it explains like what Ifrit is, in that thing, it's going to say Ifrit is an icon. Because it says he's an icon, there will be a tab at the bottom that says, hey, we mentioned the word icon. You probably don't know what that is. Click on this to figure out more. And it's like, I love that. I freaking love that in this game. But yeah, the world is great. The characters are great. What did you guys think about the story? I know we touched on the characters and the character interactions. What about like the grand story of what they're fighting for? Because I know there's like touchy subjects in there, and then it kind of goes away from that into more of the Final Fantasy. Like, we gotta defeat God, who's trying to destroy the world. How did you guys feel about the story overall?
It kind of, it definitely eventually like veers into being very Final Fantasy. And like, I think like that just comes to the territory. I've accepted like that's going to be in game every time. Like, we're going to have to defeat like this like super all powerful mythical kind of like godlike being. I've accepted that. And so, what I'm looking for, honestly, like in my Final Fantasy games are kind of like the journey there, and kind of like moments along the way. And so I think like my favorite games are like the ones that are like able to give you like multiple like very memorable like pivotal moments throughout the journey. For this one, I'm like, there was like definitely a lot of memorable stuff. I don't know if it's quite up there for me as like, all the moments I felt like in even 7 Remake, which really is like a third of the game, where it's like,
right.
When like Cloud meets Aerith, or like they drop the plate below, or Cloud dances in the Honeybee Inn, like stuff like that. I could rattle off like 5 more and 10, and like, I feel like I'm like looking for more of those moments than the overall arching kind of story. I enjoyed this one. I think there was like maybe like a couple moments that I think like maybe could have like hit harder, shined harder. Like I said, I think my favorite stuff was like with my boy Joshua here.
You really standing Joshua. You love Joshua.
Whenever he would show up, and like I think they did a really good job of establishing their dynamic, like Clive's like
the brotherly,
guilt for like what happened to him, or like hadn't even processed what he had did or potentially had done. So his kind of journey with that, I think like was what I was engaged with most in the story. So like, I think a lot of my favorite moments were like seeing Joshua getting tasted of Joshua.
Whoa! Oh, okay. You're up there with Joshua.
Like getting hints of like his whereabouts and stuff like that, and then like, I kind of wanted Clive's reuniting with Joshua to really be even bigger, but like, it happens like in the middle of like the Bahamut fight, and like the mom's there too, and there's so much other things going on.
There's a lot of juggling. Yeah,
they couldn't even quite let that moment breathe, which I would have preferred more. But, overall, once again, I'm like, I enjoyed so much about this game. I think it's like when it comes to like the greater pantheon of Final Fantasy, I'm like, it's not quite at like these other heights that I've seen in the franchise. But, definitely not a bad story or anything like that.
For sure. Toasty?
For me, first of all, I definitely have to pay Final Fantasy X, because Whooper TV keep mentioning that game nonstop, and I'm feeling guilty for leaving it sealed for the last 2 to 3 years. But I need to hop on into real quick.
Yeah, but like the PS4 has like an edition, right? I think.
Yeah. They have
that's the one that I have.
It comes with 10 and 10 too. There's no excuse. Yep. You got the whole package.
Yeah, just get ready for the battle order. The batting order, and you'll be good.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna play it soon. First of all, I have to say I actually do love the story, but I do have to say it's incomplete to me. I do feel like there are a lot of pieces that are missing, and initially it was a little bit aggravating because I was told that it was a complete story by the producer. We're not expecting a DLC even right now. As far as we know right now, there are no DLC. There's nothing else to add to the story, and they are probably working on the next game. That's as far as we know right now. And for me, there are things that are missing out. The parts that are great are amazing, but certain parts I felt like were missed out. Leviathan needed to be explained more, and for me, that's why I don't believe him
Leviathan.
when he said, "Hey, there's no DLC."
What a name! They mention him, and they're like, "There's Leviathan."
Joshua was like, "Oh yeah, the lost Leviathan."
The lost.
Yeah,
Leviathan.
Like, what?
Leviathan, the lost, and then boom, move on. And he was on the map, so he appears in the game as a picture. The Northern Territory, I needed to be expanded in, and I'm not sure if you noticed that, Hooper TV. When you open up the map, if you go to the Northern Territory, everything is covered by blight except the middle portion of the Northern Territory, which implies that there's still quote unquote life there because it's not disturbed by, which meant that there has to be something there. Again, I know they say no DLC, but I like to believe there's going to be a DLC. The Iron Kingdom, we faced the Iron Kingdom once, and that was it. I felt that they also needed to reappear, especially after they got a slap in the face by the main character. Yes, they ran away back to the island, but come on, the world continent was falling apart, and I low-key expected them to reappear after the king was the king of the Holy Empire died. After the king or the emperor, Sambrek.
Yeah.
After Sambrek fell apart because the prince disappeared, MIA, the queen is dead, the little prince is dead, and the empress, everyone in the royal family was in a way dead to the outside world. I expected the Iron Kingdom to make a comeback for revenge. I didn't get that, and I really hope it is added to the DLC, because if they move on to the next story without finishing this portion of the game, years down the road when we review this game 5-6 years later, if the next game does come out 5-6 years later, that would be one of my biggest criticisms, and my score would definitely drop from where it is right now. But I mean,
no,
you're still hoping we got DLC.
Yeah,
story.
I'm gonna remain hopeful and say that they are gonna do DLC. At least for the success of how this game is doing, they have to, just to address some of the things that you brought up. The whole thing with Leviathan.
Leviathan feels like an easy win.
It's so easy because it's it's funny because they and I feel like the devs are lying to a degree where they say like, oh yeah, no, this story's complete. Like, there was no intention of making a DLC. So then I'm thinking, so you wrote the story to mention Leviathan and not do anything with him. And yeah, no intention of doing that. That's got to be a lot. There are certain areas in the game, and I don't know if maybe either of you encounter this, where it's like, there's like a locked door somewhere, like in like a secluded area, and I thought it was going to be endgame. It was in Rosaria. I thought it was endgame stuff, like, oh, clearly this door will open, like, you know, as a secret boss or something later on. Never opens it throughout the game. And Clive says like, oh, this door is closed. How, I suppose it may open some other time. And I'm like, what? Like, no DLC. Like, get out of here. Y'all are making that. There's no way you're not.
Not only that, people were saying that depending on where you stood on the map and you look in the direction where the door was,
the tower,
there was a tower in the distance
that you never get to see. Yeah,
you never get to see.
Yeah,
no. The more we're talking about this, it's like it feels like, you know, they wanted to like tell this kind of like Game of Thronesian kind of like, you know, story about like these different kingdoms and like them interacting with each other, and like, you know, kind of like touch upon like heavy thematic things like slavery and stuff like that. But like, you know, you also have the God story you have to tell. And,
you have to tell the God story.
And I feel like those kind of like wanting to do both, I think probably led them to kind of like kind of not like kind of like hitting it out of the park in either one for me. Because it was like, if they really like honed in on like, you know, defeating this God story, then like, you know, I could see them if they really focused on it, they hit that out of the park. They really just like honed in, removed the God Ultima out of the story, just like had it about these different kingdoms and how like they rise and they fall, and like the Iron Kingdom tries to like take over at some point after like you were saying, you know, and like they kept the story on that. I think they really leaned into that. You could have gone some really cool, interesting places.
Definitely.
But instead, you know, it's kind of like a villain of the week sort of thing. It's like, all right, we're in this place, and Clive's going to destroy this crystal, and then that empire is going to be done, and then we have to move on.
Right.
And then he's going to go to this empire, and both the king, the queen, and the son are going to die consecutively in the span of like 10 minutes. And it's like, wow, I felt like these people were pretty important. If you have to rattle off all their deaths and like kind of like
in one scene.
Yeah, I was like, all right, I guess we're done with the Holy Empire Sambrecht now.
We're done with all the empires and kingdoms bickering with each other. Now that leaves room for the god to come down and be the central threat.
Yes, you know, and it's like, once again, hey, I'll eat this up every time. I will definitely be getting 17, like if not day one, weekend one. If they want to redo it again, but like, you know, you're like, hey, like how was the story? I'm like, maybe not the cleanest. I'll say that. Not the cleanest.
Not for sure. Yeah. I think they maybe shot themselves in the foot by having a character that was a god separate from the kingdom bickering, where they could have done it to a degree where maybe one of the emperors or kings from one of the kingdoms becomes that god instead. So like, you know, through the battles and wars and everything, they accumulate enough power, and that's how they reach that status of godlyhood. And Square Enix can have their cake and eat it too. You have your god, final enemy, whoever it is, but it's tied to what is going on right now in the story with kingdoms and wars and conflict, instead of just having a god in the background coming in saying, oh, I am God. I will kill all of you now.
Yeah, I think 6 does a good job of that too, where it's like kind of like
I've heard.
Recurring antagonist, like kind of like eventually elevates himself into being kind of like the end game. And I kind of thought they were leading you to believe it would be like, you know, something to do with like Sambrecht, you know what I mean? They seemed like kind of like end goals.
It implied that a lot, because you had the thing with the mom and like the heir that she had was kind of sketchy, like he looked demonic a little bit.
And then it ended up kind of, you know, it ends up being Ultima, but then it's like, actually it's the King of Waylude who's like kind of been like running around also. And it's like, well, all right, sure, I guess if you say so.
Right.
Even though he was like a pretty cool boss, and
he was cool.
Fun to fight.
I liked him as well. But yeah, story could have been improved on in certain areas. I guess we're kind of at that part where, you know, we put a pin on it early on, but now it's the final piece of the puzzle in 16, the combat. Yay or nay on the combat for you guys? Is this what you want in Final Fantasy? Do you Toasty's like yay, very yay?
Okay. Honestly, I wouldn't mind a turn-based combat because I do love turn-based combat game. I'm just a fan for the classic turn-based. And I would love if I got the option to do both, but I think that would be too much to ask from a developer. But this combat, in my opinion, without having played a lot of the previous game, was the best combat out of all of the games that I've ever played. The characters for me...
All the games.
All of the Final Fantasy
of them.
Oh, okay.
Every single game.
No, only Final Fantasy.
This is the best combat in any game I've ever played.
Only Final Fantasy. And the reason for that is because I slowly felt that the character was getting better at fights. I felt Clive, late game, was more agile, and he felt like he actually got stronger, obviously, with the icon powers, compared to Clive at the beginning of the game. Like I said, once you get to late game, you activate Shiva's ability. You can slide, freeze the enemy, and use Odin and Bahamut to stun or, you know, mess around, stagger the other enemy. I felt strong. It felt the character was getting stronger overall. I didn't feel like that with 7. All with 7, you got a bigger sword.
Damn, not with 7?
I didn't feel it. I
really
hated
that about 7.
What? It's a 7 remake, right? 7.
Seven remake.
Okay,
yeah,
7
remakes.
7 Remake stayed hard. I felt like I was getting better, but like those enemies were also progressing a lot.
They were getting
Exactly.
harder, and yeah, for sure.
Which is what made it so difficult to feel like your character was getting stronger. With 16, by the end, I figured out which combo, which ability I wanted to interact. And once you perfected that ability, it felt so great. Once you beat a boss or you took a good chunk of HP by either dodging or perfectly executing your combos. To me, that had a different feeling.
Let's talk about that. I don't know if this is a good podcasting, but what was your kind of like in-game kind of like setup at the end? What were you guys like kind of like using the
wow.
most? Your icons and like your abilities.
Mine was Shiva. I had Shiva, oh my god. Shiva, Bahamut, and Ramu. I would use Shiva.
This is good.
I would use Shiva to do the AoE, which does a lot of stagger damage. That messed up bosses really bad. And then she also had like God, what was her other ability that I used? It was
that she sends out the
crystals, and they pull people towards you. That was a good like crowd control ability. So that was what I did with Shiva. And then with Bahamut, I would usually use them for bosses. I use the orb ability where the orbs would like home in on people. And then the Omega Beam. Oh my god, no. I would use that Omega Beam attack. The
Kamehameha attack.
The Kamehameha. Yeah, that ability. And I would do the one where he would charge up like his was it like Mega Flare or something that like every time you dodged, it would build up. I love doing that. Huge, very huge. And then Ramu was the weird one. I liked him for like the lightning stuff. Did some stagger damage, did some major damage, but that was my setup throughout most of the game, and then towards end game. That was what I was using.
For me, I used Ifrit. I like the Phoenix ability. It was AoE crowd control, especially during boss fight.
Ifrit or Phoenix?
Phoenix, the Phoenix
okay.
one that you got. That the default ability that you got at the beginning. Because I updated the Phoenix ability to the max, and he did even more damage because he had a secondary animation to him. And to me, that was a great way to get rid of all of the enemies around you and just leave you one-on-one versus whatever big boss was around. Obviously, there was that, and I used he had a dashing ability. Then where he dashed and he felt like he was on flame, and he dashed towards you and he could pick up the enemy and drag them.
Oh, that was Ifrit. That was an Ifrit ability.
That was also the Ifrit ability. I used Shiva, obviously the stagger ultimate with the pull towards you.
Yeah.
And apart from that, I used Ramu. I did end up using Odin at the end because once you perfected Odin's ability and he did that entire like slash
Zen Tatsuken.
Yes, and all the enemy got wiped out. That one was amazing.
It was always clean to see. It was clean to see that one.
So apart from obviously the fire and Shiva, I switched between Ramu and not Ramu, Bahamut. I switched between Bahamut and how do you call it? And Odin ability.
Odin. Yeah. I feel like for me the worst one was Garuda. At least for later on. For me.
So I like that Garuda was really good at staggering. Like Garuda would build the staggering bar. So I would use like this is how I'd go into like pretty much after like in-game type stuff. For me it was like Bahamut. Just dodge until I have that fully charged. Unload, unleash on like especially like there's crowd control, just unleash like level 4 or 5 or whatever, drop that down, and then if it's like a boss, I would like get close. I would do Shiva's strongest attack to like freeze them, and then stagger the mess out of them. Garuda's strongest attack, stagger the mess out of them.
Oh, her tornado thing.
The tornado thing would stagger the mess out of them.
It was high stagger.
Usually by then they're staggered. I'm like then like unloading Bahamut's like ray just to like destroy them, and then like another Phoenix big blast, like whatever, maybe it was Ifrit's or Phoenix's strongest attacks. Like I'm just like right there, and then usually by then I'm done. That's
like, if you're not, rinse and repeat.
Yeah, or like I have to do it one more time. There's a couple like I think an S tier person on
the contracts.
Yeah, on like Waylude that like I just like mowed through. It wasn't even fair. I felt bad. I was like, man, you're like,
No.
I think it was like the king of the goblins or something. The king of the yeah, the king of
The
the
orcs.
orcs.
The
or whatever.
orcs, yeah.
Yeah, like came in there, like he came out of his castle, then I destroyed him. Like,
Oh, I know which one. Yeah, the red one. It was like a red
Yeah.
one, I think. Yeah, on
yeah,
Waylude.
and I was just like, oh man, I'm sorry, guy.
Yeah.
I'm gonna keep it moving now.
No, but you see, this is why I like Shiva with the Bahamut ability when you charge up and the beam were falling from the sky. With Shiva, if you change to her and you press circle to dodge, it would freeze the enemy, so all of the blasts would keep falling on the frozen enemy. And with Shiva, if you dodge everything perfectly, I had a fight where the enemy was perfect and were permanently frozen the entire fight because I was doing a perfect dodge every single time.
That's so funny.
Oh my god, it felt so great.
I'll say I'll say the devs did a really good job making all the icon abilities unique and different to fit any particular playstyle you wanted.
I never used Sid's icon. Sid.
Ramu, the lightning.
Yeah. Like I got Ramu. I think that's the third one you get.
Yeah.
So obviously added it then, and then like as soon as I could take it out, I took it out and never went back. And I think that was the only one.
Are there no Titan stands? No Titan stands here?
I use Titan.
I love his counter. His counters are like, when you counter, he goes. I love that.
I didn't like his shield. I didn't really like his shield.
What?
Because I dodge.
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah, I was more of a dodge guy too. But like, I feel like I would go out of my way to block just so I could see those animations and see that stagger go up once you you upgrade and he starts punching the crap out of them.
I liked when he like does like the ram punch and then like pounds the ground to like make like it like explode like around you. Those are two solid attacks for sure.
Yeah. Right. Did you guys? I think we kind of touched on it a little bit. Did you feel like you were kind of like running the formula or like kind of in running the motion to a degree in the combat? Because like for example, I can say once I got my mains, which was Shiva and Bahamut and Ramu, I didn't change them throughout the rest of the game. But like obviously when I got Odin, I'm like, okay, yeah, let me see what Odin does, and I liked it, but I'm like, I'm going back to whoever just took Odin's place. And like for the rest of the game, like at least for combat, what is it? Square, triangle, square, like on repeat, like doing that until you get your icon abilities and you're spamming them. I felt like you could kind of approach every fight for the most part in kind of the same way. I didn't get that in a game like Final Fantasy VII Remake, where every encounter you had to change. You couldn't use the same strat on certain enemies versus some of the later bosses or even some of the newer enemies you encounter. For this one, the Goblin King, whatever I killed him with, I used that to kill Ultima. It was the same exact thing.
But
I'm right with you. Like by the time like the last like handful of hours, like I think it took me, I didn't realize until like pretty late in the game that like if you master an ability, you can place it anywhere.
Yeah,
that was like huge for me. Then I was like, all right, so I don't have to keep using like all of Garuda's moves. I can just like have one Garuda
pick
move.
the one you want, right?
Yeah, and so that was like huge for me. Then I took back all like my ability points that I like had like uselessly somewhere else and like just started mastering a couple. Like I'm right with you. Like towards the end when I was like, all right, my rhythm of like dodging with Bahamut, freezing with Shiva, like then just unloading, like this works every time.
It worked,
like,
yeah.
They're not touching me, you know what I mean? So I'm just gonna keep doing this, and like I felt like I didn't feel the need to change. And so it's like it's kind of like that two-edged sword, because where it's like I liked how we all just went around the room and said like, oh yeah, I was using this and this worked. I was using this and this worked. And like, that's always cool. But it is just different than like, I think what the Final Fantasy VII Remake experience was, where it was like, I don't know how I'm going to pass this guy. I got to switch out my sword to like be more like magically based.
I struggled in 7 Remake. I had to reassess. I had to reassess equipment, my party build, my abilities.
Yeah.
I didn't really have to do that too much in this game. And I think that kind of goes into a criticism that I think all of us may have on this game in particular. We have a party that we bring into the game, like whether it's Jill, Sid, Torgal, but you can't do Joshua, but you can't do anything with them, minus Torgal, telling Torgal what to do.
Yeah.
But like what I mentioned earlier with Torgal, in the menu, there's like upgrades that he's getting throughout the game that increase speed and attack. And he's like a Pokemon that can transform with a Mega Evolution. And I'm like, why can't I do anything with that? Whether it's control him, upgrade abilities, like in the other Final Fantasy, like in 15, and even like I like seeing that the characters could fight on their own. Like with Jill, she would use her Shiva abilities. Sid would use his lightning abilities, but there wasn't really any RPG elements with those characters. I kind of wanted that.
Yeah, Toasty, go ahead.
Okay, thanks. I'll say, but that's where the game, they kind of messed up. They wanted to give us so much freedom with the abilities that we could do. They forgot to restrict us a little bit, because as we're talking, I'm remembering in 7, you had to change your equipment, you had to change your weapon. The weapons were useless in this game. You just upgraded to the next powerful weapon. I never looked.
Yes.
Yeah, big numbers go burr. Whatever had the higher number, you just equip that. No strat. No elemental weakness, no tricks with it, nothing. Big number, equip it.
Yep.
This is where they could have done it better. If I'm fighting against one of the monsters that use lightning or against a fire monster, I should be thinking, okay, do I use the ice ability? If I use the wind ability, is it gonna make the fire stronger?
That would have been kind of neat. Can you imagine if you're fighting like a fire enemy and Hooper TV uses his favorite tornado Garuda ability, and it just ignites the boss, and he's like screwed now? See, that would have been nice.
Even better, if it goes, if the boss get hit by the tornado, in the middle of the tornado, there's no wind, it could have just flamed out when the enemy loses its flame. There's little things like that. Yeah, there's little things they could have done, and like it is aggravating. Even when you think about the theme party, we didn't think about that. And 15, you could do combo with your partners. I remember there was a point in the game where you could do like a temporary finisher depending on who you were next to, and you did a party combo. Why couldn't I do that with my team?
Yeah,
and I met with Joshua,
Torgal, Joshua.
A
Jill.
Joshua or a Phoenix Ifrit combo. Why can't I do that? A Jill.
You could do it in boss fights, but not in regular encounters. Yeah.
But that's the issue. The boss fight felt like what we started. It felt like a movie. So it was always entertaining to see, but I wish I could have been able to use it more casually. And this is why I said at the beginning, the character interaction for me was lacking. And I hope in the future patches, I know it's less likely at this point, but we never know. If they release a DLC or future patch for this game, I hope they allow you to do those little things that were in 15 or in 7. And I feel like where the game did well, it did extremely well. But certain things like cooking food was a big thing in 15.
I love cooking food. The ingredients and the stat buffs that you got.
Exactly. Remember, you actually had to get certain stat buff depending on the enemy. So if you knew you're going to fight an enemy that did poison damage,
poison
magical protection or poison resistant food. Little things like that for me were, and the food always looked great in 15 for whatever reason.
The food looked delicious, like
it looked delicious. But in this game, the only time you do anything regarding like food or drink is at the bar, and it cuts into a black cutscene. There's not even an interaction of the character talking or dancing around with each other. It was just the gulp, 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 and then that was it. And you didn't even get an after effect, even if you kept drinking and drinking. There was no status effect to it, which to me, they removed features that I'm guessing they didn't think that people were gonna miss. But once you start thinking about previous games, like, you know what? That was a useless feature, but I like that feature. So why remove it? It's little things like this.
I like stat buffs.
I think of it like the home button on the iPhone. Nobody ever thought about the home button, but once you took it away, you're like, you know what? I used to like the home button.
Yeah.
Like, it's little things like this, man. Like, I don't know.
You know,
Yeah.
you mentioned that, like, that enemy that I keep forgetting the name of, the Moroboros, the swamp monster thing.
I'm actually gonna look it up. It should be on the Wikipedia.
What I know, it starts with an M. But like, an enemy like that, I mentioned that he does bad breath in the game. Bad breath in Final Fantasy, that attack from that enemy, you always want to dodge it because it inflicts some of the worst status ailments you can imagine. What is it? Morbo?
Morbol.
Morble. I don't remember the beginning.
That sounds right.
Okay.
Marble.
All right. I'll go with it. The Morble. It inflicts like poison. It inflicts stun, paralysis. It's the worst things you want on your character. But in this game, when they do it, Clive just drops to the ground for like 5 seconds and he gets right back up. No effects, no poison, no gradually decrease, nothing. And I'm like, I'm not really afraid. I still don't want to get hit by it, but I'm not afraid of that attack anymore.
Yeah.
Imagine they allow you to buy custom armor where you could change the armor look with different attributes, different swords. It would have been like, because the sword with 100 attack, but that does bonus fire damage, would be good against a plant enemy against a sword that only does 200 damage but with no stat bonus. Little things like that. They
right.
Diversify.
Yeah, it's like they do a lot right, and I think we've been doing a good job of like highlighting like how we enjoy the combat and like how it feels and like kind of like different elements that we thought was like really good. But I think there's like, you know, I think Square Enix, like, and I think you saw this with like 15 and 7 remake a bit, like they're trying to kind of like attract more of like a Western audience.
Yeah.
It feels like they're trying to make their combat, you know, be more action oriented. And, you know, I didn't really feel like they were getting away from the RPG elements in remake in 15, but like felt like this one, they kind of really like dialed a lot of it back.
They put it on the nose. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, and I don't think that was the right call. You know, I think it's like, I think you could do both. You could have like an action oriented, you know, like really all the other action franchises are kind of leaning more into RPG elements in terms of like God of War, Horizon.
Oh my god, yeah, God of War of all things is more of an RPG than 16, which is crazy. It's crazy.
The armor and like my weapons, like for, you know, a good 10 minutes before being like, all right, this will raise this, but this will lower this, like it'll give you this ability, you know, like I was looking at that for a long time at God of War. And it's funny, we're releasing this like a couple of months after it's released. Like right now the hottest game out is like Baldur's Gate 3.
Baldur's Gate 3.
Which is like this gigantic CRPG kind of like old school Dungeons and Dragons.
Setting the bar.
You know, like RPG element as it gets. I haven't played it, but like just based off of like the screenshots I've seen, like there's like 50 options and there's dice rolling. And it's like, it seems like
it's a complicated system.
Right, yeah, really complicated, but they didn't dial any of that back. And so I think like Square Enix, like I one of my favorite things about like kind of following their history is kind of like seeing how like they react to like kind of like people's reactions.
What are the
and,
trends?
Like,
yeah,
the trends, kind of like their setting or sometimes following, you know what I mean? Like so I think like with this one, it'll be interesting to see like how do they follow it up? Like will they like go super hard back to the super hard back to the RPG elements, make it turn-based again?
Oh my god, they're too far gone. I feel like they're never going back to turn-based.
I don't think they're gonna do that, but like maybe the next one they really lean into it again, because like, you know, once again, it wasn't enough for me to be like, oh, like I didn't like it, but it was like going to the weapon thing and being like, all right, I get a new weapon, choose, upgrade, equip. All right, keep it moving, you know, like it was like that honestly doesn't quite feel as Final Fantasy to me as like, you know, some of the previous games. So
right. No, same here. It's definitely a feature that I was noticing a lot through my playthrough where I'm like, man, this is lacking here. I'm still having fun with what they're doing right, but just a little bit extra with that RPG element because it's Final Fantasy. That RPG is its DNA. It's just very shocking to see them not include something like that. in this particular game, regardless if they want to focus more on like the action heavy combat. You can have both. You can have both. But yeah, I think, you know, for the most part, we've covered everything with this game. We covered the story, the characters, the combat. I guess final stuff going in, you know, what do you guys think overall of the game? How would you rank it amongst the other Square Enix titles or other Final Fantasy games, whether it's in relation to story, combat, or the whole package? And what do you want to see from the series moving forward? Do you think this was a step in the right direction and you're like, yes, Square Enix, more of 16, keep doing this? Or do you think they should dial it back a little bit on certain things that 16 did? What do you think?
It's a great question. I think, like, for me, I'm like, I just want them to keep trying. You know what I mean? Like, I want them
keep
to
experimenting.
Keep experimenting, keep pushing the boundaries. Like, I kind of don't want the next one to like be a quote unquote like sequel or being another one set in like a medieval kind of like fantasy world. Like, all right, yo, send us to space next. You know what I mean? Like, go steampunk. You know, like go like, you know, do like a whole different kind of like fantasy world we like never see coming again. You know. I always want them to like continue experimenting, and so I think that like puts me in a position where I'm like, I'm just here to consume, you know.
Consume you. I will consume all Square Enix products.
You know what I mean? Like,
I get it.
The numbered Final Fantasy, like,
the numbers,
like, yo,
yeah.
Whatever's next, like, I'll be there. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, and so when it comes to like kind of that kind of mindset, like, I was always gonna be here for this one. I was always going to play it. I was always gonna finish it, and like, I did all that. Is it my favorite? No. Like, I'd probably put, out of ones I finished, I'd probably put like 10 over it.
Toasty, do you want to play 10 now?
Look,
definitely 7 remake. You know, there's like a couple of ones I've like dabbled with that I haven't finished, like 12, 13, where I'm like, I don't want to put it over it, but I feel like,
damn, there
like,
it is.
I have it
I'm
here.
kind of like, oh, nice. Oh, so clean. I mean, Tidus and Yuna. I mean, you want to talk about a power couple. Them right there. Anyway,
so I've heard.
This is not a 10 podcast. You know, I'll just say, like, consume this one. Really enjoyed my time. I feel like I've, like, mentioned, like, my little gripes of, like, I want more cheesiness. Like, you know, kind of, like, more humor. Some more RPG classic elements in there, and then do whatever else you want. You know what I mean? Like, just do that. Keep crystals, keep Moogles, lean more into Moogles. That Final Fantasy cheese, man. Like,
be dumb.
Dances at the Honeybee Inn. Yeah, you know what I mean? As serious as Cloud is, he dances at the Honeybee Inn.
He dresses like, in drag at the Honeybee Inn.
He dresses in drag. You know what I mean? Like,
Clive ain't doing any of that.
Clive ain't doing any of that. Like, is like, you know, is like, as wild as 15's story is, like, you know, it's really about 4 bros like driving around in a car. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm like, lean into your cheesiness. Like, that's a part of like your history. That's always kind of been like who you are. And get back to that. Do whatever else you want. You know, give it back to Yoshi P. Give it to another like up and coming developer. I'd say keep Nomura in Final Fantasy VII Remake. Like, that worked well for him.
Yeah, he's in his bag for that one at least.
Yeah, you know, we don't have to loop him back in too soon. That's what I'll say. And I'll just add this too. What Clive says at the end, man, I wanted to look up this quote. Here, Toasty, you can go first, and then I'll look up Clive's final quote. It's pretty great.
For me, I'm not looking for a character that's obviously a clown, like in terms of comedy, but I am looking for a character that's more entertaining and
has range.
I'm looking for somebody like Dante from Devil May Cry. When we played the new Devil May Cry 5, Dante, when he fight, he has a serious moment, but he also has this goofy moment where he dances in the middle of cutscene, which I thought was always entertaining because I'm like, what is this dude gonna do next? And that's what I'm looking for. And I think that the trope that they have of the silent, serious protagonist is something that should be sent to the graveyard. Let's move away from that, add more interaction with the main character. I'm hoping they bring back more of the side not mini game, but the side activity, like the food, the drink, something different.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
bromance, I guess, between the character party. I hope they also add that. More interaction. I wanted to feel like when I'm playing the game, it felt like these people are friends and not just strangers together on a fight.
Yeah.
And Loki, I think it would have been amazing in terms of story purposes if it showed that Clive was silent at the beginning of the game when he was working for um, the Branded,
Yeah.
because he was part of that assassin group.
Yeah.
By the time he met up with his squad, if you notice, he opened up more when he was traveling. And if you replay the game, you would have noticed, notice at the beginning when the other squads are talking, he's silent. He just insert, yes. But later in the game where he is back with his friend and family, he opens up more. He's more interactive. Yeah. His emotion comes out. That's something I'm looking forward to. And I think they missed with that. But overall, I love the story. Nothing against 15 and 7. 7, I only played a remake. I do have the base 7, which I guess I can go through at any moment. But 15 story made no sense to me at the time. If you ask me about the story right now, I can't remember.
That's a problem. That's a problem.
I remember. Okay, some fuckery. The kingdom next door attacked his kingdom. They were forced to go into exile. He was looking for his fiance. She ended up dying because Leviathan decided, hey, let me blow up the city that worshipped me. I can't remember why, but it ends with him going into, I guess, paradise, sitting in a chair, and she appears next to him. The end. That was her scene story. 7, they're a bunch of terrorists. That's what they are. They're terrorists.
Eco-terrorists.
They're eco-terrorists blowing shit up, destroying families. The man was a couple people in.
That wasn't them. That was Shinra. Shinra framed them. They're innocent.
Okay, Shinra did frame them, but they caused themselves to get framed.
It's a domino effect.
Yes, I know one of the people who's dead, their cause was probably 2 days away from retirement. He worked 50 years and then boom, dead. Like, whatever. But this game, the story for me was the best out of the game I played so far until I get onto this game eventually. Final Fantasy X. But this game was the only story where I actually went back and I read multiple character description, and I tried to break the world down and say, okay, here's the connection with this character, here's why this character did this. And Annabella, for example, I understood that's the only character where I went back and read her lore and said, oh, I understand. She was part of the Rosalia family. She carried the blood of the Phoenix. She was ashamed that her first son did not carry the Phoenix, so she heard gossip of people saying, oh, he's a bastard. She's raising a bastard. So she got angry, which forced her to kill her husband and marry somebody more powerful because the husband was too laid back. She wanted to have recognition. That's the only Final Fantasy game that made me go and search for the story, even when it was given to me. And even now, I'm still looking at videos and cutscenes of things that happened in the game, which I already saw, and somebody else is giving me a different perspective, and I'm like, oh shit, I missed that. That's awesome. That's the only game so far that has done that to me. But story, amazing. Other part of the game they need to improve on, especially the main character and the party interaction. That's my biggest gripe. And obviously the RPG style with the weapon, which are useless, and equipments.
Right.
Yeah, so I have Clive. It's one of Clive's final quotes. I'm surprised if you guys don't remember this, but Clive at the end tells Ultima, the only fantasy here is yours.
Yes.
And we shall be its final witness.
Yes. Yep. I was streaming it. I screamed. I'm like, he did not just do that.
That's the cheese I'm looking for. That's the cheese I'm looking for. I wanted more of that kind of cheesiness.
Yes.
And it didn't come until the very end. I was like, I know they didn't say Final Fantasy.
They finally said it. I don't think, funny enough, I don't think any other previous entry of Final Fantasy ever mentioned any combination of words of fantasy or final Fantasy. And
this game did.
This game, of all of them, it's wild. No, that scene, I love that scene. Yeah, I agree. It was one of the best final quotes in a Final Fantasy game. But yeah, I'm with you guys on this one. I definitely love the story. I love the characters to a degree. I wish they did a little bit more with them in certain areas. Combat, like I'll stick by it. You know, I think our criticisms of the game are so strong because we love what they did right, and it's like we wanted that to be throughout the entire package. You know, give us more customization with our party, have us upgrade them, have some more party interactions outside of cutscenes, to give us that connectivity with the characters. In terms of how I would rank this one out of the ones that I played, I mean, that's kind of hard because like I'm all over the place. I played, I think for numbered entries, like I played 13 and 15. And other ones I either started and didn't finish. Like I started 13-2. Did it? Oh yeah, right. 7 classic. I did play 7 classic. And remake. and remake. So oh man, it's just hard. I definitely like this one. It's, if there's any confusion as to, man, they really ripped into 16. at least for me, yes, I know we did. I still love this game. And that's why it's one of those conflicting like things that I have for, because I love it so much, but it's just some of the things they do get on my nerves, but I still love the game. So yeah. I mean, how I would rank it amongst the other ones, definitely better than 13. I'm sorry for the 13 stands. I'm not about it. 13 at the bottom from what I played. Definitely above 15, at least for like the whole package, for like story, and combat. It's probably right under a 7 remake for me, at least, because I really like the story with 7 remake. I like, the combat goes into very interesting territory. I think remake is right above it, and I kind of lump 7 and remake together, so you know, because they're the same thing to a degree. So that those two are above 16. Crisis Core is a little weird. I'll
forget about that game.
I'll throw it in with 7. It's above 16. The entire 7 series, from what I've played, which is like remake, classic, and Crisis Core. To me, they're still better than 16 overall. But 16, I feel like is really strong. Maybe my mind might change once I play 10 and 10-2. I know there are great things about that one, especially for the characters and the romance in that game. Yeah, no, this 16, I really did enjoy. I really enjoyed it.
It's solid. I think I'm going 7 remake, 10 over it, and maybe 12.
Oh wait, is that from top to bottom, bottom to top?
Yeah, top to bottom.
So 7, 10, and then 12.
Whoa. Well, I'll go 10 if we're going
10. Top
1.
10.
7 remake. I really like 12. 12, like I think like for whatever reason, 12 might be like my dark horse. But like to what you're saying, Dr. Jace, I feel like probably what I really like about the franchise overall is that Square Enix is constantly taking risks, constantly rolling dice, constantly changing like what kind of constitutes the Final Fantasy game, whilst bringing along like, you know, certain elements that stay consistently throughout. And that what leads you to comparing them. You know what I mean? And that leads to some people being like, I swear by 8. I think 8's trash. You know what I mean? Like
9 is like, peak. We went downhill after 9.
Yeah, exactly. And that leads to like so many people like having different opinions. But then also like, even though like, you know, I have my criticisms of 13 and like some people swear by it, I think it's like, it's all out of love. You know what I mean?
Right,
like, we're obviously clearly locked into this franchise. We've spoken about some gripes about 16. But it's because Square Enix isn't just trying to like just do something easy. You know what I mean? They're like,
they can, but they don't, and I like that.
They're constantly pushing the envelope, and so I appreciate them for that. And that's where I'm like, even though I've had my nitpicks, I'm still not like trying to like shame them for like trying this. You know, I'm like, here are some nitpicks. Here's what I think could be done better. but I'm still here for it. I'm still here for fun.
I will consume 17 whenever. I will consume 17 and Rebirth once that comes out.
Oh, Rebirth
all of it.
Easily. Rebirth easily. We'll do a 10 pod. And
Jesus. Oh, yeah, we have
months,
to.
Couple months. And then, I mean, Rebirth is supposed to be early 20.
Early 20. Assuming there's no delays, 20, early 2024 is what we're looking at. And you know that does make sense because like I think remake came out like April of 2021 or 2020. 2020.
Yeah, it was April, May. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Because that was right before the PS5 came out. So yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So that probably same time frame for Rebirth. But yeah, no, we're here to consume all Square Enix property, Kingdom Hearts, Final Fantasy, all of it, every single bit. But yeah, I would say that kind of wraps up our thoughts here at the Yonko table for Final Fantasy 16. We were late to the show, but we were ready to go. We were like a fine wine that needed to age just right so that you can get the juiciest review for Final Fantasy 16. But that wraps it up here for Final Fantasy 16, folks. Be sure to listen to us on all your listening stations, whether it be Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, at the Yonko Table. Let us know what you think of Final Fantasy and 16 as well. What was your favorite in the franchise? What was your least favorite? Where did the series peak and went downhill? I'm sure we'll get different answers on that. And yeah, we'll catch you on the next one, folks. I am your Yonko host, Dr. Jace Attorney, fellow Supernova Toasty, and Admiral Hooper TV. Signing off.
The
Hooper
only
TV.
Yep.
Go. Oh, yes. Close it here. Close it right there. Go.
The only fantasy here is yours, and we shall be its final witness.
Beautiful.